Usos. Today, they're considered one of the greatest tag teams in modern professional wrestling. It's hard to dispute that claim, but it maybe wasn't always that way. Jay and Jimmy Uso are completely on a different level today than when they started their WWE careers. Let's go back 20 years ago. Dig deep for reasons why the Usos spent a significant period of their career trying to gain respect for themselves and respect for tag teams in general. When we say Us, you say O. Yes, let us know in the comments below what you think of the Usos. I'm Kevin. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. Being the sons of WWE veteran Rikishi and a part of the famed wrestling royal family, the Anawahis, the path to becoming professional wrestlers didn't take very long. Within 2 years of getting into the family business, they signed developmental deals with WWE. Just a year after that, they were stars on the main roster. The Usos had a problem debuting in WWE before they ever stepped on camera or got in a ring. That was because they were a tag team in WWE in the late 2000s, early 2010s, when tag teams simply were not being featured. Former WWE superstar Charlie Haas once explained that WWE boss Vince McMahon didn't like the idea of tag team wrestling in general, felt that it was simply an added expense to have 4 guys in one match. This resulted in periodic neglects of WWE's tag team division throughout the years. And that was something the Usos were going to have to fight against. Now, how do you debut in WWE as you already feel that that's being weighted against you as simply just being a tag team fundamentally is a problem? They debuted with Tamina, also a member of the Bloodline, and marked out early as targeting another unified family-based act in WWE, the Hart Dynasty, then WWE Unified Tag Team Champions. In May of 2010, on Monday Night Raw, Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole were puzzled by these nameless newcomers who laid out David Hart Smith, TJ Wilson, and Natalya. Then Raw GM Bret Hart actually signed the trio, who he didn't know would attack his Canadian kin. It was a family versus family feud to introduce the Usos and Tamina, playing off their generational connections. We just gonna keep it real with you. We wanted to let you know that your family ain't the only family that runs deep in this business, said Jimmy in their first big breakout promo. Now, WWE wasn't featuring tag teams, but they were certainly trying to give the Usos and Tamina their own identity, one that would give them legitimacy coming into WWE for diehard fans who had followed the business for decades. Though tag teams were not the top of the card acts with WWE in 2010, the Usos came into the company with a wave of disruption and a chip on their shoulder, as they literally splashed the competition, yet that did not translate into championship gold for their first few years. They would deliver thrilling performances, and it never really earned them the straps they were after. That would change, though, but they were destined to knock off an act that defined an era before them. In 2014, Jimmy and Jay got the big pop with that traditional haka dance entrance that riled up the crowds, chased down the legacy tandem of Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, the New Age Outlaw, came back to WWE for a victory lap as WWE Tag Team Champions. It was a clash of generations on Raw, and the brothers came out with their first championship tag team win. Though they would capture the tag team gold a second time before the end of the year and be named the 2014 WWE Tag Team of the Year, gaining recognition was still going to be an uphill battle. As a team, they would score stellar bouts and technically sound matches against some of the best tag teams that WWE had to offer. They were still just a tag team, right? They needed something else that made them stand out. A twist for the twins was needed. In 2016, as they once again attempted to pursue the SmackDown Tag Team Championships in a contenders tournament, facing a team that truly tested them. And that test would come from below. The team rising up underneath them would surpass them for some time. And that was the American Alphas, the hottest new team drafted to SmackDown from NXT, featuring former Olympian Chad Gable and collegiate standout Jason Jordan. They were going to occupy that #1 spot as the good guys on SmackDown. What did that mean for the colorful face-painted duo, Jimmy and Jay? What started out as a pre-match respectable meeting, a shaking of hands, saw a quick knife in the back attack by the Usos on Jordan and Gable, After losing to the American Alpha in 28 seconds, the friendly rivalry was now bitter. It was a real personal issue. Usos launched an assault, changing their careers forever. It's one thing to deliver a body splash to a man's midsection, it's another thing to do it to his knees. They were out to injure, maim, and manipulate their enemies. This was a different version of the Usos. Flashy face paint was gone, washed away, showing their true resentful colors. To counter these fresh heroes, WWE needed strong villains, and this new presentation and good timing benefited the Usos. With a new coat of no face paint right before WrestleMania 33, the Usos would dethrone Alpha Academy and capture the first of several SmackDown Tag Team titles. The now edgier Usos would march into 2017, becoming truly one of the best acts in WWE around this time and having some of the most reliable performances on pay-per-view before they would meet their true rivals. One of the best WWE Tag Team rivalries of the past 10 years when they would begin to face The New Day. It was kind of similar to Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair, Macho Man versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. They met their match and would have truly seismic performances. The bad blood would boil over into a Hell in a Cell match, maybe one of the most underrated in WWE history, with the Usos defeating The New Day to finish the feud. After that, the two sides couldn't help but have some level of mutual respect with each other. Once they had their truce, the Usos were sort of good guys again. Except this time, they weren't going back to the face paint and smiles, but keeping that edgy sneer at the side of their mouth. By this point, the Usos were really getting acknowledged by a large portion of the WWE fanbase as being one of the best, if not the best tag team of their generation. From having a general lack of respect and apathy from fans, they finally got a much-needed level of recognition that maybe they were due years before. The New Day had already established themselves in a category of maybe all-time greats, but the Usos were creeping in on that conversation as well. You may not believe it, but it was in WrestleMania 34 in 2018 that the Usos finally got their first appearance on the main card of the grandest stage of them all. Imagine that. Sure, they had some pre-show appearances here and there, but it took them 8 freaking years to make a WrestleMania card. Unfortunately, they would lose at the hands of the very large and ferocious Bludgeon Brothers. Although they were kind of just treading in the tag team division in 2018, they were by no means irrelevant. They actually led SmackDown to their only win in Survivor Series in 2018, and it wasn't counted because it was technically on the pre-show, I guess. In early 2019, they dethroned the best tag team in the world, The Miz and Shane McMahon, to once again recapture SmackDown Tag Team Gold. They were a big reason why Kofi Kingston was able to make it to WrestleMania 35 on his Kofi Mania quest to become WWE Champion. The then villain of villains, Vince McMahon, had put Xavier Woods and Big E of the New Day, Kofi's partners, in a tag team gauntlet match. They had to win to put Kofi into WWE title match contention at Mania, and only when they won would he get that opportunity. A beaten and battered Woods and Big E had to go through a daunting field of opponents before getting to the Usos. But in a show of shocking solidarity and maybe one of the most respectable forfeits of all time, the Usos would forfeit. This was a massive moment in that Kofi Mania storyline, made them even bigger fan favorites than they were before. In storyline, McMahon punished them for this by putting them in a fatal 4-way tag team match at Mania, and being on the opposing end of McMahon punishment is usually a way of elevating superstars and making them more vulnerable and beloved in the eyes of fans. They carried on their momentum at WrestleMania 35 and retained their titles in their first ever win on Mania. The Usos would lose those titles, though, to the returning Hardy Boys a couple of days later at SmackDown and get sent over to Raw for the first time since the brand split was reintroduced. Unfortunately, this coincided with that awful wild card rule where superstars in one brand were allowed to go to another. So while also feuding with the Revival for the Raw Tag Team titles, they had a feud on SmackDown with Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan, showing that WWE truly wanted to bet on the Usos to carry the tag team divisions, but they unfortunately failed to regain the SmackDown tag team titles again. The feud with the Revival just wasn't that great. It was definitive of things that WWE was trying post-WrestleMania in 2019, and unfortunately it was an underwhelming year for the Usos at this point. They failed to win any gold after April, and after Jimmy had a DUI arrest, the Usos were kept off television for the remainder of the year. What would happen for them? Would all of the issues outside of the ring and just other circumstantial setbacks really set back their career and maybe even their legacy as one of the greatest tag teams of WWE's current crop? They returned to aid Roman Reigns in a feud that nobody wants to remember against the Baron Corbin guy. Yeah, that was a weird one, but at least the Usos were back in the mix. The pandemic would hit at WrestleMania 36. Jimmy Uso would suffer a knee injury that would keep him out of action for a long time. Another career renaissance was in the works, specifically for Jey Uso. Without Jimmy, he would have to define himself. He would have to do something different, and Roman Reigns was reintroducing himself as the tribal chief. He was going to demand that his family fall in line and be under his command. Jey just wasn't having it. He would return with a new look, a new attitude, and a fresh chip on his shoulder. He would actually be the first person to challenge this new tribal chief, Roman Reigns, for that Universal Championship in a stellar, underrated match at Clash of Champions. The personal issue would boil and boil on for the weeks that would follow. Though Roman would come out top as the Universal Champion, the personal issue got even more violent, even more vicious, with Roman believing he was doing the right thing by brutalizing his own family member Jey Uso inside a Hell in a Cell I Quit match, where Jimmy Uso himself had to run out there and save his brother, and only because Roman assaulted a prone, even injured Jimmy Uso did Jey Uso say those dreaded words, "I quit." It is truly one of the best moments that WWE had inside of the no fans pandemic era, and it was a sign of the character level of growth we were going to get out of all of these men. Jimmy Uso would finally return post-WrestleMania 37 in 2021 and join the fold without much of a fuss. It only took them a few months to recapture the tag team titles on SmackDown, and this time they would go with the run of their lives for 622 days as WWE stormed out of the pandemic and went coast to coast. The team being booed the most was the Usos. They would become the gold standard of WWE's tag team division, and this may be their best run as champions in WWE. They did this all while helping Roman Reigns sustain his WWE World Championship and Universal title runs. He wasn't a champion unless they interfered and helped him. Yeah, some of you guys need to acknowledge that. The Bloodline became one of the biggest factions in modern-day WWE, and the Usos were a critical part of it. They were the meat of the plate. They made it move. Roman Reigns may have been the figurehead, but they kept this machine going. Enter all of the dramatic and wonderful moments they had with other players like Paul Heyman, the Wise Man, Solo Sikoa, and of course that entire issue with Sami Zayn. Along the way, all of that worry about tag team wrestling not being at the top of the card would be destroyed in La La Land for the first time in a long time. The Usos would take championship gold, the tag team titles, unified from both Raw and SmackDown to the main event. In one of the greatest WWE tag team matches of all time, the Usos would fall to the team of Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. An absolute 5-star, 6-star, 10 stars. I don't care how many stars Dave Meltzer has. He could give it all to this match that they had at WrestleMania 39, closing out night one. Having banger after banger with the best tag teams in the world, it certainly helped them cement their status. But if you look at the overall change in their careers, it happened because they finally got a much-needed boost of character depth. They were allowed to be a version of themselves and grow as themselves on screen. They had a hell of a run with the Bloodline, and they would turn on Roman Reigns, and actually, in a tag team match, the Bloodline Civil War at Money in the Bank, they did something unthinkable. They were the first people to pin Roman Reigns in years. Jey Uso would do it. It was an incredible thing, but abruptly later, Jimmy would turn on Jey, even though Jey got Jimmy to leave the Bloodline. It was sort of a mess. They would have a final conquesting match, brother versus brother, at WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia. The hype was there. Many believe the match didn't live up to the hype, but the brothers certainly got to have their moment as solo superstars on the grandest stage of all. The Usos have proved themselves to be some of the best supporting players of WWE's most profitable storyline in recent years, and the best part is now as solo superstars separate from each other, they still have quite a shelf life left in in-ring action. Whether it's them reuniting again in the future or extending their legacies as single stars, maybe having a redemptive redo of that brother versus brother match, it's exciting to see what is next for the brothers. So what do you think is going to be the pinnacle of the Usos' career? Was it WrestleMania 39? Was it their brother versus brother match? Or is it a match we haven't seen yet? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and check out these other great videos from Sportskeeda Wrestling.